our discussion tonight is the chairman of the House Intelligence Committee, Democratic Congressman Adam Schiff of California. Chairman Schiff, thank you very much for joining us on this important and historic night. What can you tell us about the possible continued elements of your investigation that might be continuing beyond this point?
Well, there's a lot that we still have to learn about the conduct of others. So we know, I think, very well what the president did, that he withheld this military assistance, that he withheld this meeting in the White House to coerce Ukraine into doing investigations to help his reelection campaign. But how much involvement did the Secretary of State have in this? So we know that he was in the loop. From the documentary evidence, from the testimony of Ambassador Sondland, we know that the Vice President was made aware of the conditionality of the military aid on these political investigations. We certainly know that Mick Mulvaney was deeply involved in this. There's more to learn about their role. There's also more to learn about when this whole scheme began, because there are indications that it started far earlier than we might have expected, that indeed some elements of this go back to when the prior president of Ukraine, Poroshenko, was in office, efforts to get that president and his attorney general, Lutsenko, to engage in these same sham investigations to help Donald Trump. So there are more things to learn, but at the same time, one thing we know already without a doubt, and that is this president will do it again. Indeed, he's never stopped inviting foreign interference in our election. And for that reason, we really cannot delay. And we took up the report. We voted out the report. That goes now to the Judiciary Committee, which will have to weigh whether articles of impeachment are warranted.
The big surprise for us who followed all of the hearings is the revelation of these call records involving Rudy Giuliani, also involving Devin Nunes, a member of the committee. We didn't know that when we were watching the hearings. When did the committee discover these phone records?
Well, you know, there are a number of records that we were able to obtain, and we obtained them over time, so I can't pinpoint for you precisely which records we learned about when. But nonetheless, these phone records show just the kind of interaction between these different players in the midst of this scheme, where you have Rudy Giuliani calling the White House and calling the Office of Management and Budget. Now, why is the president's attorney calling the Office of Management and Budget, which is holding up the military assistance? You have Giuliani obviously working with Parnas in touch with this reporter for The Hill magazine that's printing these false allegations about the Bidens, about Ukrainian supposed interference in the last election. And, of course, you have the ranking member, Mr. Nunes, also in touch with these players. And so we're trying to identify the full scope of those who were complicit in what the president was doing. And these records give a window of insight into exactly that.
Did the Republican members of the committee know that you had these telephone records while, for example, the hearings were going on?
Yes. In fact, the Republican members were made aware of the subpoenas that we were sending out. The Republican members were given the same phone records and other records that we received. And so they've had this evidence as well. Now, what they've chosen to do with it, whether they chose to look into it, ignore it, or hope it got swept under the rug, I can't say. But, yes, they were privy to this information as well.
So just as we were watching Devin Nunes in the hearings, he knew that you had obtained phone records that included him, and that those phone records would inevitably be made public by your report.
Well, he certainly had possession of the records. Now, how much he looked into them, how much he discussed what they showed with his staff, I really can't say. You would have to ask him. But he's certainly aware of his own conduct. He's certainly aware of his own communications with Mr. Giuliani or Mr. Parnas or with others. And whether that and to what degree that informed his conduct during the course of the hearings, again, are questions for him to answer.
There are some calls in there in which it's not clear, it's not identified exactly who Rudy Giuliani is speaking to. There's a New York Times report tonight indicating that the possibility is the president could be on the other end of those phone calls. What can you tell us about that?
Well, you know, the short answer is we don't know for sure. We are trying and have been trying to get records from the White House, which has been unwilling not only to share them with us, but it looks like unwilling to share them with witnesses like their own ambassador to the EU, Gordon Sondland. But We can see in the Roger Stone trial that when Roger Stone was in communication with the president, it showed up as a -1 number. Whether that's the same situation here, we don't know, but we're trying to find out. It is worth noting, however, that Rudy Giuliani has one client in the White House, and of course that's the president. So this is part of the picture that we continue to investigate. But given that the evidence against the president is already overwhelming, we were not prepared to let it slow us down.
I want to get your response to what the president said about you today in London. Let's just listen to that for a second.
I think Adam Schiff is a deranged human being. I think he grew up with a complex for lots of reasons that are obvious. I think he's a very sick man, and he lies.
Now, as I said, we're going to have a psychiatrist actually react to that later in the hour. But what did you feel when you heard that today?
Well, he gets more and more untethered over time. And I certainly had the same impression that you're likely to hear from the professional who comes on your show, which is this is a president who has done nothing but project onto others his own lack of morality. That's unfortunately not a unique character trait or pathology to this president. We see it exhibited in some of the members of Congress. But that's certainly what appears to be the case as far as I'm concerned.
Now, you, of course, we've all seen you shrug off these kinds of comments by the president in the past. But it's comments like that about some of the witnesses in this case that actually found their way into your report. And you suggest that that includes witness intimidation by the president.
Yes, and this part of a long pattern, which goes back to the Mueller investigation, in which he was calling those who would cooperate with authorities like Michael Cohen a rat, in which he would praise people like Manafort, guilty of multiple federal crimes, because he wouldn't cooperate with authorities, and in which he would attack anyone who spoke critically of him or even more seriously exposed wrongdoing, misconduct, abuse by him. And of course, his greatest venom is reserved for the whistleblower, because the president believes he has a God-given right as president of the United States to abuse the power of his office and not have to suffer people exposing it, who he considers to be traitors and spies. If you consider people who expose wrongdoing as traitors and spies, it's because you think you are the state, that your interests are commensurate, equal to, coextensive with the interests of the United States. That is not the case here. And sadly, we have a president who believes that he has every right to use and abuse the power of his office to help his reelection campaign, to coerce allies to do his dirty work. And the American people have a right and a need to expect better in the President of the United States.
Chairman Schiff, where does the investigation go from here? You voted tonight, the committee voted tonight to deliver this report and its evidence and all the underlying evidence to the Judiciary Committee. When will the Judiciary Committee have that information, and when will they be able to act on it?
Well, the report will be transmitted immediately. We'll also be transmitting the evidence that underlies the report. That may take a bit more time, but they're also moving with alacrity and with thoroughness. They're going to begin tomorrow with constitutional law experts to talk about the import of all of this. What does this mean, this clause in the Constitution about treason, bribery, high crimes, and misdemeanors? What did the founders mean when they talked about bribery? Is it the same as we understand the criminal offense of bribery, or is it in fact broader? Does it encompass when a president of the United States is trading his public trust, trading his office in exchange for political favors, something of great value to him? So that discussion is going to begin immediately. That's going to begin tomorrow. But there are also going to be other proceedings in the Judiciary Committee, which I leave Chairman Nadler to describe.
Chairman Adam Schiff, we can't thank you enough for finding the time to join us on this historic